I'm often asked how traders use Squawk Box audio, and my best answer to that is that similar to every trader using a chart a little bit differently, every trader that I've ever talked to in my 7 years of doing Squawk Box audio, each trader uses a Squawk a little bit differently. If I could isolate one thing that I find that traders who are the most beneficial way to use the Squawk Box, I would have to say that it's best used in exiting a position, in taking advantage of the market conditions in order to squeeze out or work that last extra little bit out of a trade, versus actually using it to enter trade, because you tend to get pulled into a trade that you may not necessarily get into due to the energy of the Squawk Box if you're using it to initiate trade. But if you're using it to close position, you tend to actually be able to use it to keep your kind of finger off the trigger, if you will, or off the mouse, or keep your finger away from clicking to get out of a trade prior to that most opportunistic time, which is oftentimes when the energy and the rush of the market is at its all-time high. So, I think that it's really important to kind of figure out when it's best for you to use the Squawk Box, and the applications that you use it best for. But in my opinion and my understanding from the traders that I've discussed Squawk Box audio with, some of the ones that are most successful in using it, it's definitely to learn the best opportunity to get out of trade and experience the best opportunity to get out of trade. It's important to learn trade from the market's perspective rather than to learn from a dozen of lagging chart tools. And this is the opportunity that the Squawk Box provides you, is to learn to trade and learn the trade from the market's perspective, because what we're providing you is exactly that. It's the market conditions in a very live, to the second, zero delay format. And we're talking about the actual participants of the market, and while the chart provides you that information, it's behind in time, and it's really providing you a historical development, or historical sort of way of looking at how things have happened and the market's development and what occurred in the market in the past tense, versus while you're listening to the Squawk Box, you're listening to how the market's developing in present tense and how the players are acting in response to the market. Because again, there is an enormous amount of information that the Squawk broadcaster, myself or any of the other broadcasters, can portray and give you in that audio format, which is just impossible to obtain through the text or through a charting tool that's out there. So, we always say that positions are not profitable by entering the trade, but in terms of where you exit the trade. And I've always really been a firm believer of this. I've known trading schools or trading groups that have actually put their traders into trade unnecessarily, just to see how they respond to trade and to see how they get out of the trade, and how they react to where the market is and the conditions that the market has in its present tense, in terms of how they should be responding to it and how they should be acting on it. It's really important, similar to this, that there's different ways of looking at it, but I've always felt that you can get in at, let's just say, the point A, and if it's a losing position, getting out immediately would be the best possible situation that you could do. Holding on to that losing position obviously is the worst case scenario as the loser increases or gets worse. At that point, the real out is what makes or breaks the trade. It's whether you get out immediately or whether you get out later, which is the make or break of the trade. Similar to a profitable trade, if you're talking about getting long at position A and the market starts to rally, getting out immediately would be a poor out, and which makes, or in this case breaks, the trade. Whereas being patient and holding on to that trade, you're long at position A and waiting and patiently waiting for the market to develop as you're hearing very, very specific details that are happening and that are creating this market development, which are going in your favor. It's very important to be able to be very patient and wait for that development to occur and then get out of the trade. And in that case, that makes the trade what it is. But it's a great point, and I think it's really good that we're talking about it in terms of how positions are made profitable, not necessarily by the entry, but certainly by the place that you exit. Also, we like to point out that stop losses are for winners. Definitely, there's a lot of people who feel very mixed about stop loss trades or actually placing stops, and it's my opinion that stops are extremely important to do because there's an enormous amount of emotions that are involved in trading, and you tend to, when you're trading without stops, you tend to kind of reevaluate your trade and tend to give basis or reasons to in your own personal, in your mind, for why you should stay in trade. And really what it comes down to is a lot of it is based on the inability to accept that you've made a mistake or that you're in the wrong trade at that time. So I like to point out that stop losses are definitely something that if you're using them, you certainly should. It's important to hear the movement of your position while you're in the trade, and that's one of the benefits that Squawk Box Audio has, and one of the reasons why I've heard in the past that traders use Squawk Box Audio is because when you're hearing what's developing, it comes to you, and you can process that information in a much different way than it is when you're actually seeing it. And some of the information that we as Squawk Box broadcasters can provide you is information that's just not available to obtain from a chart. Again, because we tap into that human level, and because we use the human aspect and are essentially describing the human development in the trade or in the market, it's really important to understand that it's the movement of your position that you're listening to, and it's the movement of the position development or the market's development that you're listening to while you're in trade. It's really important to know where the market is by hearing the volume and positions of other traders through the broadcast. You'll hear the roar of the pit, which is a clear indication that there's more trade occurring versus the lack thereof. You know, sometimes, again, I like to kind of play both sides of the fence here when I'm describing the squawk on general vague terms, and it's very important to understand that the Squawk Box will either give you the clear indication that the market's in a very heated, high energy type trade, or lack thereof. And while, as much as I've said it 100 times, I would love to have a switch that I could throw on or a key that I could turn that would always create this chaotic market condition, because that's when it's most fun for me to squawk, when there's all kinds of things to talk about and all kinds of different participants and market players and response and action, reaction type activity going on. But it's also very important as a trader to be able to isolate and be able to objectively determine when there's very lack of trading or lack of energy in the market, because those are often times that you want to try and avoid trading. Also, another time that you want to try and avoid trading, which you can easily obtain from listening to Squawk Box Audio, is when there's very little rhyme and reason, where there's very little follow through, or when there's very little initiative type activity that's creating market movement or price development. These are times where it tends to be choppy and it tends to be just very little follow through or very little momentum. So actually getting into trade at these times tends to be much riskier than it would be during other times when the market's kind of in very heated market conditions and moving with objective and with conviction. These are the times, again, when market has conviction that you can actually, I'd like to say, hang your hat on something or base trade decision on things that are developing and expect to see a response to those developments or a response to that market activity that should kind of fall into place with the way that it has before. And if the market doesn't respond in a normal way, you know that this is not the situation that you had expected, and this is not the situation that you expect to develop in the way that you had anticipated that it would. So it's very important to be able to isolate market conditions, which is the Squawk Box is an excellent indicator of, and in many ways different than just a chart. There's many things combined with the chart that you can do in terms of a visual format, but all of that is available to you in an audio format if you're listening to the Squawk Box. And keeping your ear in tune. You can't listen closed-minded. You need to listen open-minded. That's very easy to do with the charts, and I think it's extremely easy to do with the audio, that you will only pick out what you're hearing that you'd like to be hearing. But it's important to understand the big picture and be able to obtain the big picture. If the market is experiencing a lot of sellers, but it's only going higher or it continues to go higher, then it's very important to be able to understand that that sell activity and that supply is being met by a more intense or more aggressive buy activity or demand. And so that's something that you can easily obtain from the Squawk Box and from the audio that we provide, but it's something that you as the listener need to be able to establish and evaluate and isolate in order to make that educated trading decision.